Okay, hello everyone. My name is Alex. Um, my background is in sort of medicine and computer science. I've been interested in computer science since I was really young. I come from a family of like a heavy family of physicians, so they constantly try to push you in medicine. So whenever I tried to stray and go to computer science or physics, my parents sort of dragged me back to medicine. But now the joke's on them because I found a way to include it in my medical practice. So I work as a nuclear medicine doctor and radiologist in Sunnybrook part-time. And then I have a lab there that does AI work. And then I also have the company where we build AI-based medical devices. So I really believe that the interesting things happen at the intersection of different fields. And so I encourage people to sort of explore their passions. And in medicine, the nice thing is there's so many different ways to include all sorts of different passions. So it gives you a unique perspective and I think a competitive edge on sort of the masses. So today what I'm talking about is sort of the road to building these impactful AI-based medical devices based on my experience. It's probably not the only road, but it's the road we sort of traveled. And I think a lot of it is translatable to many different scenarios, especially building startups in general. As a disclosure, so I'm a co-founder and co-CEO of 16-Bit. We have two products that operate in the osteoporosis space and in the sort of pediatric bone age space. So our objective is to get an appreciation for the sort of the full life cycle of a medical AI tool from inception to actually impact patient care, and to understand some of the important considerations when considering a medical AI project. So this is the road. The start is sort of down there with idea inception, and then you want to build a sort of proof of concept. We'll talk about why that's important. And then if it's an AI-based algorithm or sort of a computational product, there's some algorithm development. And then algorithm development is very different from product development. So don't get the two confused. And then after product development comes the validation, then the regulatory, sales and marketing, and then reimbursement, possibly depending on the device. And then maybe you're at the finish line, but we'll talk about some other things at the time. So idea inception. The first thing you want to do is try to figure out what is the problem that you're trying to solve. A lot of people tend to have ideas like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this, or wouldn't it be cool if we could do that? But if you get this wrong, then all of your effort for many years potentially is kind of a waste. So it's important to figure out what clinical problem are you trying to solve and really quantify that gap that you're trying to fill in. And if you've identified the problem, you want to identify sort of a technology or something that you can build on or build that can help solve that. And ideally, you do that with technology that is new, because it makes it more likely that it hasn't already been done or tried before. And so we call these sort of inflection points. So when I was sort of near the end of medical school, it was right around the time where we got convolutional neural networks for AI image analysis. And that was an inflection point. Another inflection point are large language models like ChatGPT and the like. So I think these inflection points give you unique opportunities to do something that hasn't been done. And ideally, you try to stack a couple of these inflection points. It makes it even less likely that somebody's already tried it. And if you're going the AI route, then you need some sort of data strategy when you're thinking about the technology that you're trying to build. Say you're trying to build an algorithm to predict somebody's chance of having lung cancer on chest CT. Well, you need to have the technical insight to know what kind of data you might need for that, and get an idea of like, where would you get this data? What is the lift to sort of clean and use that data? And that's a very important piece of any AI device. And then you want to sort of identify what is the business case for this product. So you have a clinical problem you're trying to solve. You have an idea of how you're going to solve it with technology. But what is the actual business value that you're generating? And how are you going to sell it? Who's going to pay for that? And in healthcare, it's really challenging because often the user is not the buyer. In Ontario, for example, the user of our road product is the radiologist, but the radiologists don't actually pay for it. It's a hospital that pays for it. So how do you make sure all the important stakeholders are aligned in order to sort of get your product to market? It's really important. And then one other piece of the sort of the business case is like the protection of your idea. Some ideas are patentable, some are not. Protection is more than just patents. It could be through trade secret or copyright, or there are other modes that you can build to help protect your idea. But that's something it's nice to think about early, because the way to protect it might influence how you actually develop or gather the data or something earlier on. It might even change slightly the problem that you're trying to solve. It might position it in a different way so that it's protectable. So these are really important things to sort of sketch out and spend a good amount of time on, because it kind of dictates like the rest of the journey. And feel free to interrupt anytime. Like, these slides are meant to sort of give us something to chat about. So don't hesitate to ask questions. So once you've sort of developed the idea, you have an idea of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, you want to sort of build a proof of concept. And there's a couple of advantages to building a proof of concept. The main advantage is probably it allows you to bring support to your cause, whether it's monetary support or strategic support, or even just building the right team together to sort of showcase your idea in something that's more tangible. And this proof of concept, it obviously will include the sort of base technology. In our sort of hypothetical example, it's the AI algorithm, but it might also include some important integrations. So does anybody, like, do you guys, are there any AI developers here, AI coders or computer scientists here? Just curious. Nobody, okay, cool. So when you make the technology, when you make AI algorithms, a lot of people make, and it's very easy to make nowadays. You could all go home, go on YouTube, and tomorrow you'll have trained some algorithms. It's not that difficult. But it's important to understand that an algorithm in and of itself is a really small part of the final medical device. It's the product around it that mobilizes that algorithm, integrates it into the right systems, delivers it to the users in a digestible way. And that's a really difficult piece that is hard to nail unless you have deep domain knowledge of who your users are and how they're going to interact with your product. And so for us, we always say, like, building the algorithm was like 5% of the technical work. 95% of the work was actually building the product around the algorithm to mobilize it. And so that might be part of your proof of concept. And then there's other things that you might want to include in your proof of concept. It might be a feedback mechanism. It really like depends on the use case. So it's hard to talk generally about that. And the proof of concept helps you, you should sort of think of your proof of concept as a way to understand the biggest risks to your journey and kind of de-risk them early. So if you believe that your biggest risk is actually developing the algorithm to do this thing, because you're not sure if an algorithm can do what you want it to do, you want to make your proof of concept answer that question for you. It's better to sort of overcome the biggest risks first, because you don't want to tackle the biggest risk later after you've already invested 3 years of your life. So that's a good approach. So this is really specific to AI algorithm development. Medical devices don't need AI to do stuff. You can do it with sort of more traditional approaches. But if you do go the AI route, then you need to obviously get the data. And as I mentioned, it's really like, that's really our secret sauce. Like, because we're physicians and we're technical on the AI side, we can kind of figure out, okay, we need this very precise kind of data in order to solve this clinical problem. And so if you have that perspective, that's very useful. If you don't, you should recruit and sort of gather people that can give you that insight, because it's really important to solve this now. Because you might think you have a good idea of it, you get the data, you build an algorithm, you build a product, but you actually find out that the algorithm is solving a slightly different problem than what you intended it to solve, and that's a disaster. After you've sort of gotten the data, you want to develop using scientific methods. So you want to, AI development is very much still an art. You can sort of try to guess what knobs you turn will produce the results that you want, but you don't really know until you run the experiment. So it's really important to sort of maintain that scientific method, have a hypothesis, evaluate it, prove it or disprove it, change one variable, do it again. And we've run, like for our row algorithm, we probably run over 250 experiments, every time changing something slightly based on the results of the previous and sort of our intuition, and we try to improve that way. And then your goal with AI algorithms is to really maximize its generalizability. So the Achilles heel of machine learning is that you develop an algorithm that is great on your data. It is fantastic. But then you go to the hospital across the street and it is miserable in terms of its performance. And this is the concept of generalizability. By developing in a way that is sound, using sound methodology, you increase your chances that the algorithm you develop will perform equally well or similarly well in other situations. Because remember, it's going to be impossible for you to evaluate it on the world's data. You can't evaluate it in every single setting. So you want to maximize your chance that the way you develop will maximize the chance that it can apply to different settings. And that's really, really important. We can talk more about maximizing, generalizing. There are many sort of things to think about there, but it's more of a technical sort of topic. So then once you have a problem, you know how you're going to solve it, you build an algorithm, you do a proof of concept, you finalize your algorithm, now you want to build a product around the algorithm. And this again is very much specific to your use case. For us, we integrate with the hospital imaging system, which is called a PAC system. We're lucky in the sense that PAC systems use an industry standard worldwide. And so we basically leverage that standard to make sure that our product can integrate at any hospital, at any clinic. And so you want to do something similar and identify what are the industry standards with the integrations that you're targeting. That way you do the least amount of work required for the maximum possible integration. And then the other thing to sort of keep in mind is at this stage, you're targeting a minimum viable product. You've probably heard this term before, where basically it's what are the essential things? It's really easy to add things on the list that are really nice to have, but are not essential. Don't do that. It's a waste of time. Just think about what are the essential things that you need, include those features, and then worry about the rest at another time. Because remember, you're trying to de-risk the product as you go as early as possible. And then that's going to come with something called technical debt, which is you're not going to do things in the most scalable way. So an example of that is our first version of the software. We had to manually sort of maintain the product. And by that, I mean, like we had to perform backups manually. We had to, when the hard drive gets full, we had to go in and delete stuff and refresh the hard drive. That was our first version. And our second version, that's what we tackled. Our main goal in the second version, everything was fixed. We just focused on the scalability part. Now it's monitored through the cloud. We can upgrade the entire fleet remotely. All the maintenance is automated. That's a problem for now, but it wasn't a problem for 2 years ago. And then you have the sort of validation. And there are different forms of validation. So in the medical space, the clinical validation is obviously very important. You want to sort of build evidence and ideally third-party evidence. So these are third-party groups that have interacted with your product, that have done their own studies independent of you, and have published the results. And obviously you hope that these results are acceptable or good. So that's really important. And then there's technical validation. So validation that your integrations are working. There aren't devastating bugs in the program. Cybersecurity risks are managed. There's a lot of like technical stuff around proving when you go to in our case, hospitals, you go to big centers like UHN or Sunnybrook or wherever, they're going to demand documentation that your system has been evaluated for all these things because they don't want to take a risk that your system opens up some critical weakness in their network. So these are things around the technical side, and again, it's very dependent on your product, who you're targeting, B2B or B2C. And then business validation. So you had a hypothesis at the very beginning when you were figuring out you have a problem you want to solve, you know how to solve it, and then you have a hypothesis as to how your product will generate value for all of the key stakeholders. Is it true? Did it actually generate that value? And the way you know that is if people pay for your product or not. That's the ultimate test. And they say you don't have a company until somebody pays for your product. So for most medical devices, regulatory is something to think about because it's probably something you have to go through. There's a big caveat here. Not all software, I'm talking about software, but it really applies to anything. Not all devices may be medical devices, and it kind of depends on how you position it partly. So have an understanding of, are you building a medical device or are you not? That's really important to understand because it changes the timelines, it changes the cost, and it changes the risk. So you really want to get informed, and there's lots of literature out there from Health Canada, FDA, lots of stuff out there. And if you have to go through regulatory, you figure out you are a medical device, engage with these regulatory bodies early. Health Canada is actually very open. Like you send emails to them and they respond and they answer our questions pretty efficiently. Like it's really quite incredible. And in this area, like unless you're like, you know, this is you have a background in this, or you've really spent a lot of time learning about it. Considering outside help in the form of consultants is usually pretty cost effective and pretty time effective. So this is an area where I would consider bringing on outside consultant help. So then there is sales and marketing, which is a whole different sort of world. And the main sort of decision point, or the sort of the path decision point here is the product you're selling to businesses, hospitals, or other sort of enterprise level customers, or is it directly to users? And actually our two products, one of them is a B2C and the other is a B2B. So we have experience in both. And if you were to look up these two and look at the, a table of the differences, it really is like pretty true and pretty obvious. Like the deals for B2B are bigger, so you have fewer deals for much bigger deals. They require more hands-on, sort of more touch. While B2C, there's smaller deals, there's turnover, usually easy self-managed. So advantages and disadvantages to both. Yeah. Not much else to say there. Like sales and marketing is a big thing. It's just like it's a totally different skill set than everything else we've talked about. And so if you decide to do that work, and I think like founder-led sales is a good strategy if you have the time for it, because as a founder of a business, you've incepted this idea and created it. Who better to sell the product? Who better to convince somebody of the value? Yeah.
So you just have a question for this Zoom. Pertaining to business validation, is it a part of confirming desirability of the product?
Yes.
For example, whether if there's a market for it or will people desire it?
Exactly. The business validation is basically the business value validation, proving that the value you're generating is real value that people are willing to pay for. Absolutely. And then comes reimbursement, which doesn't apply to everything. This comes into sort of the dollar per quality thing that Pascal was mentioning. So when it comes to reimbursement, some medical devices will have a strong health economic argument why the government should reimburse it. And that comes from the fact that you make an argument that says, hello, government, if our device or software or whatever was used broadly, then you actually will save dollars in the long term. For example, you identify cancer earlier in a cost-effective way, you decrease the number of people in 10 years that have later stage cancer, you save lives, and you prevent costly surgeries. So you can make an argument around that says, you know what, you're right, and the health economic value of that is $50. So we will pay physician, we will make a reimbursement code. And any physician that uses your software can get reimbursed $50 from the government. That's the whole idea. And the way you sort of achieve that, it's not achievable for many things, but for some things it is achievable. Is you want to build the clinical literature that says this thing really should be the standard of care. It improves patient outcomes. And then you need a health economic analysis that says, given this intervention, how much does it cost to generate a quality? So the dollars per quality. And there is that term of the amount of $100,000 US, sort of around. That's more of my understanding, that's more of a US number. So in the US, very rich country, privatized healthcare, so dynamics are really quite different than Canada. You can kind of justify that if your intervention costs $100,000 but generates one quality, there may be a market for you there. In Canada, that number is probably closer to like $40,000 to $50,000 per quality generated. So it depends, and like I said, like it's jurisdictional, it's complicated, it's optional, depends on the device. And again, another great area for seeking outside third-party help, unless this is like something that you're very exceptional in. So this is the road. And you think we're done, but then you have to do support, surveillance, patches, new features, new algorithms, and maybe new products. So it's a long road, but it's pretty interesting. A lot of learning. It's good for curious people, but it does take a lot of effort. That's it. Any questions?
Can you tell us a little bit about the history of 16-bit, how you got started and the challenges you faced, how long it took you?
Yeah.
Because that's just to give you a little context, the premise for this course is exactly what you showed, but very early.
Yeah.
So inception, proof of concept, MVP, doesn't go any further than that. Just more kind of why would you want to start a startup? Why would you want to get involved?
So our journey was like we incorporated in October 2016. But we were still residents at the time, so we didn't have a lot of time. And truthfully, like the market for AI medical devices was still maturing. Like we were sort of like really closely in touch with it, and we realized like the market probably isn't ready to like buy one of these things. So we participated in some early sort of AI competitions. We won 2 of them. And that built a good sort of brand recognition for us. And then we had an algorithm, like a bone age algorithm that, one of the competitions was for a bone age algorithm. And we put it on our website as a demo, and we found like tens of thousands of people were using it. And so we're like, we should kind of make this into a product. So even though the market for it is tiny, like if you were to like look at the sort of the market share, like it's tiny. It's not about the revenue at that point for us. It was more about 1, brand recognition, but 2, kind of like an opportunity to go through these steps for a product and learn. And so that's what we did. We built a product around it. We did clinical validation, we went through regulatory, you got Health Canada approval, and so on. And then during that time, we were sort of thinking about what is our next product, and we came up with an idea where we can identify people at risk for osteoporosis from just routine x-rays that somebody may have had. And that idea came from sort of a clinical basis where we know that in osteoporosis, there's change in bone density, which is how we make the diagnosis, but there's also change in bone quality, which is sort of how the bone is architected. You can think of it as like, if you have the same mass of concrete, depending on how you structure the building, you can have a very weak building or a very strong building. So the same thing happens to the bones. And in X-ray imaging, it's hard to measure the bone density directly, but you see the bone quality or the architecture very well. So we hypothesized that an algorithm could learn to pick up on these features and predict the bone density and therefore predict the patient's likelihood of having osteoporosis. And so that's what we did. So we thought to fund it, we thought, who would benefit from such an algorithm? Well, pharmaceutical companies that generate, that sort of sell osteoporosis medication would benefit from this. We reached out to some, made an argument that they should fund it, because if we're successful, then they're successful. And they did. And then we built a proof of concept, we got the right data, we found the right data sources, we built a product around it. We got regulatory approval for it, and then we created a business proposition, which will take too much time to get through now, but we basically made sure that who are the decision makers and aligned all of their interests and created a product, delivered the product in a way that generates value for everybody. That's what we think, and we've been selling it, so that's validation on our sort of hypothesis. And now we're working on FDA. We're sort of near the end of an FDA de novo cycle. And we have 2 other sort of experimental ideas in the pipeline, and our team's about 10 people, and yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a long road. Like if you're deciding whether you want to do it or not, it's always, people say this, they say it's always harder than you think it's going to be. I don't know if that's true, but it's hard. Like it's hard because like it's emotional, it's long, it's uncertain. Like you got to be comfortable with uncertainty. You got to really believe in the cause. Like our product, like our road product, osteoporosis screening, it screens like 1,000 people a day. And like I can be sitting on my couch and like we're screening 1,000 people a day and making like a real difference in people's lives. That sort of power of scale is really amazing, and that's what drives me. So I think it's important to have that, because if it wasn't for that, I probably would have given up a long time ago, to be honest.
So why would you have given up? Like, at what point, at what point do you go, oh God, I'm really not sure, I want to continue?
I think I probably would have given up probably like 2 or 3 years ago, like when I became a staff physician. When you're a staff, like, you have other pressures, like you also want to spend time and I like research, like I like doing research, so there's a great opportunity to grow in that area. There's other things I'm interested in. So if I'm not interested in this, I'm gonna not spend my time on this, basically. Like I have many interests, and so I need to be really interested in something in order to spend time on it.
Who did you partner with? And I don't mean to say who was a person, but what were his or her characteristics?
Oh, that's a good question. So my partner Mark, he is also like a radiologist with a background in engineering. His characteristics. He has great work ethic, really good work ethic, really smart. And he really can he just gets things done. He just gets things done. And I trust, like when he says something, I don't have to ever doubt it. Like it's gonna get done when he says it's gonna get done. So very reliable, very trustworthy, intelligent, and hardworking. That's how I define Mark, yeah. I think as an aside, I think having a co-founder is like almost like critical. Not because you can't do the work alone, but almost because of like the sort of emotional journey and just having that person that's like really, you can talk to your partner about it, you can talk to your friends about it, but nobody really truly understands except for that person who's like right there with you the whole way. And for me, there's a lot of value in that. Some people maybe not, but there's a lot of evidence that says the startups that are there's a lot of evidence that says solo founder startups don't do nearly as well as startups with at least 2 co-founders. And I can see why. Yeah.
How do you manage your other profession? It's like, have you reached a point where you think you should quit everything else and just focus on this, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been able to manage just by like time management skills. Like I'm pretty like meticulous with how I spend my time. And everything is organized, like if it's not on my calendar, it's not happening. And I've never been good at time management. Like, I've always been the guy who hands in the essay the last second. I study for all my exams like the night before. I've never been like the plan ahead kind of guy, but it came out of necessity because it's impossible to do otherwise. And so I've evolved. So you see my like my inbox, my email inbox is like very organized. So like as soon as emails come in, I categorize them as something that needs action, or something that I'm waiting a reply, or something I've delegated, or something for reference, or something that's scheduled immediately. So my inbox is always zero. And that allows me to really quickly, like just, it's very efficient, and you're surprised, it was amazing to me how much time I gained from that. Not just time, but sort of clarity of mind. Things aren't so cluttered in my head, and so you can be much more efficient with your time. But it's tough. Yeah, it's really tough. And again, I think it just comes down to, I mean, at the end of the day, we all sort of do what we want, right? Like, if you really want something, you're gonna find time for it. And for me, I really want to work on this stuff, and I really want to do my AI research, and I really enjoy my clinical work. So right now, it's kind of like all three of them. And then as I start to enjoy one less, I'm gonna start to divert more time to the other one. Yeah.
How would you go about getting any support or mentorship for?
Good question. So I didn't get a chance to talk about it here, but we've been really lucky. The ecosystem in Toronto is like really becoming quite amazing. So when we started in 2016, it was okay, but it's changed a lot since then. So you're all sort of the beneficiaries of that. So we went through the H2I program. That's, I don't know if you guys know it, Health Innovation, really amazing, with us from the start. We went through the CDL, the Creative Destruction Lab, which is a bit sort of more intense, really focused on raising money, which was never really our target. And then like numerous grants and awards and things like that. So in terms of like being able to fund, so our startup is entirely bootstrapped. We haven't raised any like a cent of dilutive funding, and we've really only been able to do that because there's so much here for offer in terms of support and non-dilutive support. Yeah.
I guess how did you protect your IP?
Yeah, good question. Lots of good questions here. So we actually filed a provisional patent a couple of years ago, right around the time when AI was becoming really popular. And we actually leveraged a grant from TD Bank, and the grant is specifically to go towards IP issues. And because we had that grant, we basically splurged on like the best IP lawyers in California. They charge like $1,000 an hour, and they like did Jeffrey Hinton's patents, like high caliber IP people. And we were able, and then we followed that up with, so after you do basically how it works, you do a provisional, that way you can talk about the idea safely. And for us, you gotta talk about the idea, about the data, to whatever. And then you follow up with a non-provisional in a year's time. And so we did that, and then we were awarded that patent. So we have a patent for any statistical method that predicts the bone density from an X-ray image, basically.
When you said that you reached out to pharma to kind of
Yeah.
fund you at that was at the very
Early,
right?
early, yeah.
And so how did you, they actually funded you?
Yeah,
And how did you deal with that funding? Like now you're giving them recognition for it, or it's just, it has nothing to do with pharma, or?
sorry, what do you mean?
So you went to a pharmaceutical
Yeah, yeah.
company and they gave you funding?
Yes.
So was it just?
Like, what was in it for them? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, exactly, like
Yeah.
what, there was a trade-off for them?
Yeah.
So were they using the medication, are you given?
No, the trade-off, so they're the market leader, right? So if we're diagnosing more people with osteoporosis, they're the biggest beneficiary. That's all the benefit they're getting, and it's, for them, it's cheap, like they're giving us some small amount of money for them, right? Like, it's not that much for them, but for their multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical portfolio, like even a 1% increase in revenue is like tens of millions of dollars.